How do you know that phrase? That is not in any words.
I learned it 3 months ago, because I wanted to say it correctly.
The treaty had 7 seconds left. I need you to understand what 7 seconds meant. In that room on that day, the Vel'nari fleet had been holding position outside the station for 19 hours, which was 17 hours longer than the original negotiation window, and every hour past the original window had added another set of warships to the formation visible through the panoramic windows of the treaty room. There were now 43 vessels. There, 7 seconds on the countdown clock were not a formality. They were the last 7 seconds of a diplomatic process that had taken 14 months, and if they expired without a signature would be followed by a different kind of process entirely. I was Lieutenant Darren Colt, junior diplomatic attaché, the lowest-ranking human in the room by 2 full grades. My job was to stand the edge of the right delegation group, look professional and not contribute anything unless directly asked. I had been doing exactly that for 6 hours. The breakdown had happened 40 minutes ago, and it had happened fast, the way diplomatic breakdowns always do, not all at once but in stages, each stage making the next one more inevitable. Core negotiators had reached the resource corridor clause. The Vel'nari had found a translation discrepancy in the coalition's version of Article 7, and Ambassador Vale had pushed back from the table and delivered the kind of formal withdrawal statement that, in Vel'nari diplomatic protocol, was not a negotiating position but closing statement. Senior Ambassador Reyes had been talking for 40 minutes, which was 39 minutes more than the countdown clock had time for. 7 seconds. I did the math on what was about to happen. I looked at Ambassador Vale, at her sharp face, and the controlled anger in those pale gray eyes, and the set of her jaw that had learned over 3 months of quietly studying Vel'nari cultural materials meant she had made a final decision and was waiting for the clock to confirm it. And I said something, not in coalition standard, not in the formal Vel'nari diplomatic register, that the translation systems handled in the old Vel'nari, the speech of the interior communities, the language that the Vel'nari used between themselves when they were not performing for anyone, the one that had no official translation entry in any database I had found, because the Vel'nari had never provided one. I had found it anyway 3 months ago in a cultural linguistics archive that had been accessible but not accessed, because nobody had thought it was relevant, and I had spent a weekend learning one specific phrase because it said something that nothing in coalition standards said in quite the same way. Velshav or Caliph said, the pronunciation of someone who has practiced it quietly for 3 months. The room went completely silent. Not the silence that comes from shock exactly. The silence that comes when something has been said in the wrong register and every native speaker present is recalibrating what they just heard. Ambassador Vale turned. The blue started at her collarbone and spread upward to her neck and throat in approximately 2 seconds. The vivid, bright, unmistakable blue of Vel'nari involuntary, emotional bioluminescence, the chromatic response that their biology produced when exposed to something that triggered a deep cultural resonance. It was not controllable. It was not something she could compose away. It lit her against the dark fabric of her diplomatic gown like something had been switched on. Every Vel'nari in the room had the same response at a lower intensity, ripple of blue moving through the delegation like a wave, subdued but present. You, her voice, was controlled but only. How do you know that phrase? That is not in any coalition language database. No human has ever spoken those words. I learned it 3 months ago, I said, because I wanted to say it correctly. The phrase was not a compliment in the simple sense. The closest translation into coalition standard was something like, "Your integrity speaks before you enter the room." But that was not quite it either. The Vel'nari interior phrase carried the specific weight of saying, "I have watched how you conduct yourself when no one is performing for anyone, and I am telling you that what I saw had worth." It was the kind of thing you said to someone when you meant it. It was also the kind of thing that, in Vel'nari culture, was never said lightly, because saying it lightly would be the greater insult. I had watched Ambassador Vale conduct herself for 6 hours of increasingly difficult diplomacy with a precision and integrity that had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with her actual values. I had meant it. She looked at me for a long moment. The blue at her throat had not faded. "Where did you find that language?" she asked. Not accusatory, genuinely asking. "A linguistics archive," said. It was accessible. No one had accessed it because no one thought it was worth learning. I thought it was worth learning. Another long moment. Ambassador Vale looked. The countdown clock. 3 seconds remained. The clock having paused. 7 when the room went silent. Standard diplomatic pause protocol that activated when verbal exchange was in progress. She looked at Senior Ambassador Reyes. The translation discrepancy. In Article 7, she said, in Coalition Standard. Back in the formal register. It is a drafting error, not an intentional misrepresentation. It was not a question. It was a statement of revised position. The Vel'nari way of saying, "I will accept this," with the implicit understanding that the other party will correct the record. Reyes said. "Correct. A drafting error we will formally acknowledge." Vale sat back down at the treaty table. The clock continued from 3:1. She signed with 1 second remaining. The room exhaled. In the formal debrief that followed, Senior Ambassador Reyes asked me what I had said. Told him. He looked at me for a long moment with the expression of someone revising their assessment of a junior officer they had not previously assessed at all. "You spent 3 months learning an untranslated dialect of Vel'nari," he said. "I had time on the transit shifts I said. Why that phrase specifically? Thought about 6 hours of watching someone conduct herself with a precision and integrity that had nothing to do with performance. Because it was true, said. And I thought someone should say it. Reyes was quiet for a moment,